order on Tuesday, March 8th at 6 o'clock p.m. We are meeting at the Cedar Creek Township Hall. The meeting will be posted on our website within the next couple days. Actually, Andy usually has it ready within a day. Nancy, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we begin, members of the audience, you will have 2 opportunities for public comment this evening. The first concerns anything that appears on tonight's agenda, and the second provides you with an opportunity to make comments about issues concerning the township. Each comment period is for 2 minutes. While this format is not a Q&A, we are taking note of your concern. Your input does matter. We had a slight hiccup with the notice for tonight's Cedar Creek Township budget hearing. The notice in the newspaper actually indicated March 9th at 6 o'clock p.m. So we will hold our budget hearing actually tomorrow evening at that time. We do have copies if you took notice at that table of the budget as well as the budget narrative. So they are available for you this evening and for anyone who is interested. While we will not officially be talking about the budget this evening, we will be conducting that hearing tomorrow. But we will listen to any of your comments regarding the budget during that second budget or that second public comment period. That budget, public budget hearing will be tomorrow, March 9th at 6 o'clock p.m. So with that noted, may I have a motion for approval of the agenda with the removal of the public budget hearing this evening and rescheduling for tomorrow, March 9 at 6 o'clock p.m.
I'll make that motion.
I'll support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any questions or discussion? Okay, check. Roll call, please.
Bob,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes.
Chuck, here, Peggy.
Absent. And I forgot we needed to take attendance.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah. If you would do a roll call of the board, Chuck.
For the vote?
Of the board of our attendance.
I just did.
Okay. All right, so we're all, everyone is here except for Peggy, so.
Correct.
That's a formal roll call. All right, you have in your packet the minutes.
Make a motion to accept.
I'll support. I did notice just a couple of things.
I beg your pardon?
Are we doing an approval of the agenda?
We
Yes,
just
we
did
did.
an approval of the agenda.
Oh, I thought that was roll call, I'm sorry.
No, we did both, we did
She
both
skipped
at
roll
once.
call. Under the treasurer's report, the transfer funds to cover, that was plumbing and mechanical salaries, not electrical.
Oh,
Mechanical, yeah.
thank you.
And then,
Can you hear us? Are you able to hear us, or do we need to talk louder?
Louder.
Okay, we'll try and do that.
under new business, the poverty exemption approval, we were actually approving the 2022 poverty exemption guidelines. So if we can just add guidelines to that.
Poverty exception guidelines.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other edits to this? I'd just like to comment the minutes looked great, so thank you.
Except for the air.
Too tiny.
They were
little
tiny,
air.
they were tiny. So, all right, I would like a motion to approve the minutes that, or those are
Amended.
the motion is with the edits, and, could I have a roll call on that with those edits?
Bob,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes,
Chuck, yes.
motion carries. Okay. Treasurer's report.
The February 1st, 2022 general fund beginning balance was $1,137,483.61. Revenues totaled $118,074.45. Expenditures totaled $32,709.22, leaving an ending balance of $1,222,848.84. And included in the treasurer's report are 3 budget amendments. I would like to ask for a motion to approve those budget amendments.
I'll make that motion.
I will support that.
Does anyone have any questions or for Heather regarding those? Any? All right,
I have none.
okay. Then we will place these on file.
Would you like to vote
Motion
on it?
carries?
Nope.
No, we don't vote on it.
Okay. Okay.
We'll
Actually,
place
we should vote on the amendments.
on the amendments? Okay, all right,
Sure. So the motion is to accept the
the amendments.
3 amendments as I have in my hand, right?
Mhm.
And that was Bob and Chuck.
Hey, I got an objection.
Excuse me, sir.
I got an objection. Why do you just like, go ahead and do this and that and pass stuff, without anybody to say anything else? Maybe I'm missing something here, I don't understand. You just gonna pass stuff then the way you want, or?
Sir, this is the format of a board meeting. This is
Okay.
the normal format of a board meeting.
Okay, well, I don't want you to get too far ahead of yourself and just, you know. take
This,
command.
sir, this is a format of a board meeting. This is the normal operation of a board meeting.
Sure, yeah, okay.
You will have time during public comment.
Okay.
All right,
okay.
thank you.
Yeah, well, excuse me, thank you.
Roll call for the
Yes,
budget amendments. Linda,
yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Chuck, yes.
Motion or amendments passed. And the treasurer's report will be placed on file. Okay, next item on the agenda is disbursements.
We just had normal disbursements. We're trying to get everything in we can because of the end of the budget year, so we're trying to turn them as soon as they come in, so we'll have a good, effective, as close as we can, end of year crossover. So
Okay,
we're
so,
just doing them as fast as we can.
okay, may I have a motion then to pay the regular monthly bills?
I'll make that motion.
Support.
All right, any questions or discussion? All right, hearing none, may I have roll call, please?
Heather,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes,
Chuck, yes.
okay, motion carries. Let's see, correspondence. I did not have any correspondence. Bob, do you?
We had a planning commission meeting yesterday, and we did approve on a special land use permit, 7200 Sherry Gontney. We approved that.
Okay,
And our next planning commission meeting will be March 23rd at 6 o'clock.
okay. Heather, did you have any correspondence that you needed to address? Chuck, did you?
I did not.
Okay, thank you. Computer's stuck. All right. Next on the agenda would be public comments. This is agenda items only. Before we move into that, I am going to ask that you consider delaying your comments regarding the noise ordinance until after the members of the task ordinance or the task force have an opportunity to make their comments, as the comments they make may answer any questions that you have at that time. While I am not able to speak for the members of the task force, they may take your questions. So, if you have any questions, or any public comments that you would like to make, regarding any items on the agenda, this would be the time to do it.
So you want us to wait until later, we're gonna have comments about the noise ordinance?
Right,
Okay.
regarding the noise ordinance. Pardon?
So you know why we're all here?
Explain that there may be some changes that you're gonna hear.
Oh, yeah, there's gonna be more,
I beg your pardon?
I think some of the questions back here, can you clarify that you will allow another public comment period just on the noise ordinance
I am-
before any decisions are made on it?
We are going to, we are having the noise ordinance, you can see where it is on the agenda. And actually, I did forget to, when I amended the agenda, I was also going to ask for, if we could move may I do that at this time? Can I amend the
Yes.
agenda one more
Yes.
time?
Yes.
Since we have our township attorney here, I would like, rather than ask him to stay through the entire agenda, we wanted to move the Maple River portion of this township agenda. So if the members of the board would not mind, I would like to once again amend this agenda.
I have no problem with that, but the question on the table is.
I am going to
I
answer
know,
that
but
with
it's
Karen's question in
significant,
this
yeah.
portion.
Okay.
I'm attempting to do this. It's a
Okay.
long-winded one, Karen,
All right.
please.
I'm
Make a
okay with-
motion to, switch the Maple River with,
At the bottom, I'll go
Move it to
last.
the
Yeah.
bottom of the-
Move it to
Yeah.
the bottom
I'll
of the
go-
noise
move it to-
ordinance,
yes,
after the noise ordinance.
okay.
So our township attorney is here with us. And Karen, in addressing your question there, so if the members of the board have agreed to are moving that, we have with us Jennifer Barnes, Captain Brown, and Lorraine Grabinski. They are all going to be making some comments regarding the task force. And I won't speak for them, but I believe they may entertain questions at that time. It's a possibility. So, but, yeah.
The question is, if they're not, they're being asked not to comment on the noise in the first public comment, we're gonna go into unfinished business and talk about the noise ordinance, which at that time, we could, by rules of order, approve it without allowing them a chance to speak until after.
No,
That's-
that's
that's-
not what I said.
Yeah,
That's what we're asking.
That's
We
what
wanna
we're
make
asking.
sure we get a chance to speak before you vote.
After Jennifer,
Yep.
Captain Brown, and Lorraine speak, I said they may
Okay.
entertain questions.
okay, all right.
That's different than we will be allowed to make comments.
May I?
Yes,
I'm not trying to make,
Sure.
I think we're all trying to stay on the same page and everyone wants to be heard. So Chuck understands my question. The public comment is on your agenda after a decision can be made. Whether they address the questions or not, you say is not up to you, that may be true.
okay, all right.
Are we going to be allowed to speak before a decision is made on that, after we hear their input? Currently, it's not on your agenda, so if you do decide to amend your agenda, we're asking for another 2 public comment periods, basically.
Jennifer,
I defer to the board, but I'm sorry.
apologize, Andy. I forget. So I'm Jennifer Barnes. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission, and I served on the task force. My suggestion to the board would be this, and obviously I defer to whatever decision you make. But the three of us that are here to speak with regard to the task force and the efforts that we put into that, we may answer their questions that they raise, but I would suggest that they do it now under public comment so that we can make sure that when we speak, we do in fact address whatever the issues or concerns are.
You would suggest we move public comment for the task force up before the,
Right now, under
Public
the
comment.
public
Public
comment
comment.
on an agenda item, we
Okay.
will attempt to answer and respond to whatever concerns they raise,
okay,
would be my suggestion.
okay,
And I'm not speaking for the other individuals, Ms. Grabinski and Captain Brown. I'm not personally interested in a question and answer with regard to the task
Okay.
force.
okay. Would you like me to, have you speak first and do your presentation before public comment?
Again, I would say have them do their public comment,
all right.
and then we'll
As it
respond.
is.
Okay, all right.
But
All right.
again, whatever the board
Okay,
decides.
all right, we are redoing this.
We're going as written.
All right, public comment, agenda items only, how's that?
Yes, I'll go first.
Yes, sir.
Dirk Burkett.
Okay.
I live over on Ryerson. My first question is, how many members of the task force do not live in our township?
The answers come later.
And then the other thing I would like to say is I believe that the majority of the township residents do not approve of this ordinance change. I know there's already a noise ordinance. I don't believe they approve of the changes to the ordinance, and I feel that it would be best to put this to a township-wide vote. So, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Yes, sir.
Your 88 decibel level, you do realize that with the grass dryers going on over there, they're above that. When a group of Harley riders go through here with 20 or 30 Harleys, they're above that every day.
We have no control.
When you have no
I
control.
could not hear, I could not hear what you said.
When a group of bikes, 20 or 30 bikes, go by, they're above that decibel level that you're setting with this ordinance, with 88 decibels, right?
But the normal decibel is 85. They've even increased it, so you can't do anything about a bunch of Harleys driving by.
Well, what about the grass dragons going down there? I hear them way over there on River Road. I don't care. We're all shooting guns Saturday. I don't care. It's why I moved to the country.
Thank you for your comment.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Greg Jenkins, I live at 3880 Houghton Duck Lake. And yeah, it's kind of my thinking is leave it the way it has been. There's no changes needed. And yeah, I hear noises. Sometimes I hear stuff I don't really like. I just put up with it. Thing of it is some time when I need to make noise for whatever reason I'm doing what I'm doing, all of a sudden then I'm going to get in trouble. I don't even make noise. But in that time when I do need to do something, oh man, now I'm in violation. And we don't need that kind of thing going on. You know, the nitpicking stuff. So that's my comment pretty much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with anybody shooting guns, but I do have a problem when they do it for 4 and 5 hours at a time, because that disturbs my peace, and I don't live in a gun range. So I don't have a problem with guns. I don't have a problem with anybody shooting guns. But do it respectfully, and this is not a gun range. It is a residential area. Do it respectfully. That's all anybody's asking.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I have neighbors that are gonna move out this summer because of the shooting that's happened down the road from them. Because they have family coming in, they can't even sit on their back porch because it's going on for 4 and 5 hours at a time. And it's not just one round, it's probably about 10 rounds. Because it's that loud.
Thank you, I appreciate your comment. Thank you. Yes,
I just have a question on the one for the animals and the birds. If you have chickens that decide they want to go off anytime at night, and I'm not complaining about it, I'm just wondering how that's going to be handled, if that's an issue with animals, because you kind of live rural, so people have different animals. Is this going to come into play with that? I mean, our neighbors have had chickens and roosters, and I thought, being from the city, I thought they would go off in the morning. That thing would go off 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the middle of the night. I'm not gonna raise any cane about it, cause I lived out here to be rural, I'm good with that. But is that something that could be a problem with this? And how would you gauge that to be that? I mean, would you guys come over and say, okay, let me sit a night with you and listen to the chickens go off? I don't really know how you can gauge some of the things that are in here, because they're subjective to things. So that's just a question.
I appreciate your comment. Thank you.
This is my turn. I'm Karen Palmer. All agenda items. So I've got a little list going here. The budget information that you have back here, I looked for it online today. I didn't see it on a Facebook page. I didn't see it on the website. Since we do have, another 24-hour period before you make a hearing on that, I would ask that you please post those so that the rest of the community has at least that opportunity to view it and look it over, because 5 minutes before a meeting when we come in the door is not enough time for us to read through that and try to build an understanding and make a reasonable public comment on it. I like his idea about a township-wide vote on this ordinance. We all know that it has, there's a lot of problems that the public have had with it. I agree with the comments on the chickens. As you know, my neighbor has some animals, and some of us have animals around, and it doesn't make that clear. And I don't know what a backstop has to do with noise. So that's another issue I think that people have. As much as I have a problem with noise too, I get it. 4 or 5, 6 hours of shooting would probably drive me crazy too. But
Yes, it does.
I could go to my neighbor or ask someone else to go with me, or go on my behalf to a neighbor, and I would rather do that, and you can laugh all you want to, I would rather do that than ask the township supervisor or a law enforcement officer for them to get permission from you to do what they please on their property when it is otherwise lawful and legal to do. The other thing is, I would like to have more information again on the budget amendment, you all. The gentleman here picked up on it. You all were making a motion on a document or amendments that none of us, unless they're inside, have more information, know what you're talking about. That makes us uncomfortable. We've spoken about that before, last July, for example. That created a problem. And if you want to be heard, you want us to hear you, you want to hear us, you want a free flow of communication and fair and everybody on the same page, those kinds of things need to start happening more often.
Thank you for your comment. Does anyone else have a comment they'd like to make?
I live across from the state game land.
We have a one public comment
Okay.
at a time. You can reserve yours for the other section.
I'll comment. My name's Lynn Sample. I live on Ewing Road. I just want to comment that not only is this revised noise ordinance not lawful, the original one isn't either. It does not adhere to the Constitution, the oath that you all took to the Constitution. The premise of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights: no victim, no crime. And having a headache or not enjoying listening to someone shoot for X amount of time, that does not constitute a victim. There is no actual harm there. There is no monetary issue whatsoever. So my comment is, I would agree also, send it out to the people. The people know what they want. And it's not dictatorship, it's not more legislation, it's not more ordinances. No victim, no crime. Drop it all.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a comment they'd like to make? All right. We'll move on then. Thank you. We'll move on to the approval of the amended salary resolutions. Under unfinished business, Cedar Creek staff and elected officials will receive a 5.9 cost of living adjustment in the proposed budget. And it is back there on the table. The elected officials have not received an increase since 2020. In our February meeting, we had to approve our current elected official salaries as part of the budget process. This COLA adjustment requires that we redo that process. So all of you have before you the approval of the amended salary resolutions. May I have you have the packet before you right here. May I have a motion to approve the amended supervisor's salary of $27,754?
I make a motion.
I'll support.
Does anyone have any questions or further discussion? Okay, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes, ma'am. Bob,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes.
Chuck, yes.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, the next one.
Treasurer.
Okay, let's see,
Make a motion to
wait,
approve.
I'm on the wrong page. May I have a motion to approve the salary for the clerk?
I'll make that motion.
The amount is $27,754. Bob, you made the motion?
Yep.
I'll support.
All right, any questions or further discussion? Chuck, roll call, please.
Linda,
Yes,
Heather,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Chuck, yes.
motion carries. Okay, all right, may I have a motion to approve the salary of the township treasurer?
I'll make that motion.
I keep forgetting the amount, $27,754.
Bob, yeah, you did.
Yeah, I made the motion.
Chuck will support.
Any discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Heather,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes,
Chuck, yes.
motion carries. Okay, may I have a motion to approve the salary of the township trustees, $5,507?
I make that motion.
Support.
Are there any questions or further discussion? Okay, Chuck, roll call, please.
Linda,
Yes,
Bob,
No.
Heather,
Yes.
Chuck, yes.
motion carries. All right, thank you. Okay, now, our next item on the agenda is the update on the potential residency concern of trustee Foster.
Sure. Ross Eastman, Township Attorney. So after the last meeting, the Township Clerk and I continued to do some additional investigation to see whether we could find any additional indications that Trustee Foster had maintained a residence in the township. We were not able to find that, so based on the board direction, Last time, I contacted the Attorney General's office and eventually ended up talking with a Mr. Joshua Booth and explained the situation to him, and he said that is the type of thing that they look into. And he said when they look into it, there can basically be three basic responses. One, they can look into it and say they don't think that there's a problem. The other, they can look into it and they would actually file a quo warranto action to have the office determined vacant. He said the other thing that can happen, and he said this is often what happens in what he called purely local things, is what they do is they would look at it and then under the statute they would say, we're not going to take an action, but we authorize you to. At which point the township then would have to make the decision of whether to file the quo warranto. So I talked to him about the specifics, and then he asked if I would give him a letter. So I put together a letter and described the issue that had been raised by the public documents that we discussed before, and what we had found in our investigation, and sent that to him. And I think that you've seen a copy of that. So that's the update as of right now, and so now it's in the Attorney General's hands, and we'll see what they say.
Okay, thank you very much for the update, we appreciate it. Any of the board members have any questions for Ross?
I have none.
Okay.
I have none at this time.
Okay, then next item on our agenda is the noise ordinance, the noise control ordinance. And thank you, members of the audience, for your comments. We appreciate it. We did take, believe it or not, even though we did take your comments seriously after our meeting in May. And the task force was hard at work. This was a huge commitment on their part. They met long and hard. I stepped down after the May meeting because I believed it to be a conflict of interest. And I had a conversation with Peggy Foster. I asked her to step down for the very same reason, because we sat on the board. She did not feel the same way, so she continued to serve on this task force. Lorraine Foster is our zoning administrator, and I've asked 3 of the members of the task force, and Lori Coker is also a member of the task force. She's sitting in the audience. She is not going to speak, but I want to acknowledge her presence here today. She served as a member of the community, and willingly so, and this was not easy. Members of this task force were ridiculed for serving on this, and I want people to know that. They willingly agreed to serve on this task force, believing that this was something that they could do to help their community. So I want to acknowledge and thank you for doing that. I want to introduce Lorraine Foster.
Nice.
Boy.
Awesome. Boy, you're
Lorraine,
in trouble.
Yeah, I'm in trouble now. That's a blast from the past, right? Lorraine Grabinski. She's a Cedar Creek Township zoning administrator, and she's going to address why this matter goes before the township board. But she's going to come up first. And then I've asked Jennifer Barnes, who owns Barnes Law Firm. She served as chair of this task force. And Jennifer is going to walk us through some of the highlights of why this task force was reconvened, and talk about the team itself and the process and, which truly wasn't very easy. And then finally, I asked Captain Shane Brown to come up and talk with us. And when I first called Sheriff Poulin, I talked with him about this task force and why we were getting this group together. And I asked if he had somebody that could serve on this task force and what it was about. And he then asked if Captain Brown would serve on this group. And I have to admit, this was a huge commitment to ask of someone from the Sheriff's Department to serve our community. And he asked if Captain Brown would do so because of his enforcement expertise. So I really want to thank the members of this task force. Whether you agree with this group or not, I really want to say thank you. And this task force that Cedar Creek Township has is approaching 30 years old. Now, we may,
The ordinance.
the ordinance, yeah, the task force, sorry. The ordinance, yeah. The ordinance is approaching 30 years. We may be rural, but we don't live in the boonies. We are a zoned community. We are a zoned community, and there are rules and regulations. And I mean, this group works so hard. And we do appreciate what they've done. So with that, Lorraine, if you would please come in and explain why this goes before the board.
Okay, hopefully this will answer questions why this doesn't go out to a vote to the people.
Because it wouldn't pass.
The township follows the state
Hold on
laws.
1 second, Lorraine, if I may interrupt. If you have snippy little comments, I'm gonna ask you right now to keep yourself, because these are professional people coming before you to answer your questions. If you don't have the respect and courtesy to listen, then I encourage you to please stand up and go out the door. I want you to hear it. I want to hear it. So please. Thank you, Lorraine.
The state has laws that tell townships, cities, villages, how they're to operate. Cedar Creek Township is a general law township. We follow those laws. There's a zoning ordinance which is dictated by zoning enabling acts. The noise ordinance is a regulatory ordinance, not zoning. It's a police power ordinance. And the law, there's a Township Act, Public Act 246 of 1945, which says the township can adopt an ordinance. The township, it doesn't go out to a vote, and this is the law. The Township Ordinance Act allows a township to adopt an ordinance to regulate the public health, safety, and welfare of persons and property, along with specific identifying ordinances. This is the act that authorizes a township to adopt police power ordinances, which is what the noise ordinance is. I, as a zoning administrator, don't go out and enforce the noise ordinance. It's a sheriff or a police officer. And so that's the act, that's the law that allows the township to adopt ordinances. And I just have one comment on the animal questions. That ordinance has been on that specific section has been on the books all these years. We didn't change it. But as Captain Brown will tell you, if they get called out, they use common sense when it comes to chickens. So that's nothing this task force changed or did anything with.
Thank you, Lorraine. Madam Chair, if you would come forward, please.
Okay.
So, as the majority of you are aware, there was a meeting over a year ago where the noise ordinance became an issue. And as a result of the noise ordinance becoming an issue, and because this issue has to go in front of the township board for the ultimate decision as to what the ordinance should or should not be, it was requested that a task force be assembled. So it was the board and the supervisor's responsibility to figure out who should be on this task force. So to her credit, the supervisor looked out into the community and said, I need to find people that have some expertise in some of the issues that are existing in the ordinance that's been on the books for, as she stated, almost 30 years. So when she reached out, our original task force that was formed included myself as the chair of the Planning Commission, included Captain Shane Brown from the Sheriff's Department. It included Jackie Miskovich from the Michigan DNR. It also included Lorraine Grabinski as the zoning administrator. We did have the supervisor on the task force, and we had trustee Peggy Foster on the task force. Supervisor also reached out to the community. We had a gentleman, and I'm going to apologize, I don't remember his last name. His first name is Steve. He was a resident of Cedar Creek, and he had joined the task force. For whatever reason, he only came to a couple of meetings and then did not show after that. The task force spent approximately an hour and a half to 2 hours every 3 weeks going over the ordinance that's on the books. We weren't creating a new ordinance. We weren't coming up with some type of way to restrict what people do or do not do on their property. It was to look at the current ordinance and look at the complaints that have come into the township to see whether or not anything needed to be modified. And when I say modified, we went through and loosened up the noise ordinance. The majority of this noise ordinance has become much less restrictive to the residents of Cedar Creek. We did in fact come up with a proposal, and as you're all aware, we had the meeting back in May over at May of 2021 over at Holton High School. When we had that meeting, just prior to the meeting, there was a bunch of misinformation that was put on Facebook about what we had or had not done with regard to recommendations for the ordinance. So when we had that meeting, there was a lot of upset individuals, a lot of confused individuals as to what changes had or had not been suggested by the task force to the board. After that meeting, and as a result of that meeting, the task force was asked to come back, look at the ordinance again, review it, and see if there's any additional modifications or changes that needed to be made. So when we came back, the task force again consisted of myself, Ms. Grabinski, Captain Brown. I will acknowledge that Jackie Miskovich from the DNR did not participate. Her work schedule just didn't allow it. Supervisor Arts did in fact step down from the task force, as she's already advised you that she did that because she felt as though it was a conflict of interest. Trustee Foster did stay on the task force with us, and we did in fact add Ms. Coker as a representative from the community, and we did in fact add Arlen Jones. I did ask the task force that as we proceeded forward, that we have an agreement that I asked everybody to sign, and the agreement was this: we aren't going to post on social media the sections of the noise ordinance that we've talked about and proposed changes to, because it's not final until it's final. So I said, if you put a change out there onto social media, people think that's what it is. But as we proceeded through the actual ordinance, we'd get to a spot and we'd say, you know what, this is inconsistent with what we did on page 1. So then we'd go back and look at page 1 and say, okay, we've got to make sure these two things are consistent, and one of the primary focuses was time frames. So we said, we've got to adjust one of them And it might have been to the very first section or the very first page that we had previously made the change to. So if there had been a post on Facebook, now we've got all kinds of confusion about what is or isn't the recommendation from the task force. So we simply ask that you not do that. I never ever, nor did the agreement, ask that you don't talk to your friends, don't talk to your neighbors. That wasn't in there. It was don't post it, because once it gets posted, people think that's what it is, and we don't have a final product until we have a final product. When we had the final product, go ahead, post it, share it, send it out. We wanted everybody to be aware, everybody to be able to see it in black and white, and quite frankly, you get to see it in black and red to show you what changes we did suggest, what sections we didn't touch, that we, as a task force, said, that's fine. We don't see any way to modify that to make it better, make it looser, less restrictive for the residents of Cedar Creek. The other request that I made to the task force was that we are charged with trying to figure out how to modify this ordinance, if it needs to be modified, so that it's for the best interests of the citizens of Cedar Creek. We will not look at a section and go, I don't like this because it affects me. I want this changed because I want to be able to do this activity and I don't want to have to do whatever the restrictions are. So I want to personally change that. We didn't allow that. I will acknowledge that we had a couple of sections where it became evident that a person or two on the task force had a personal agenda that they were trying to advance when discussing that particular section. And I would say at that time, remember what our charge is. It's not about what I personally want, it's what's best for the community. And when taking that into consideration, the person that had the issue that they wanted to address said, you know what, you're right. I agree with what has been recommended. You can see that we went through the ordinance literally section by section. It took us months to get through this. We all did this for no charge. There was no payment to any of us. We had no personal gain in any of these modifications. My point is this. We focused hard to make sure that we were protecting the citizens of Cedar Creek Township. Somebody asked a question, how many people on this task force live in Cedar Creek? The answer to your question is not many of us. But those of us that don't reside in Cedar Creek came with specialties. We came with background, we came with experience that was believed to be helpful to this task force. And we did not write this ordinance, or these proposed changes to the ordinance, I should say, to benefit us. This is not drafted so that we can say, well, this is what they do over in Norton Shores. We want to implement that into Cedar Creek. We actually discussed, well, Cedar Creek is rural, Norton Shores isn't, so we're not going to use their current version of their noise ordinance as an example for ideas of how to make this better. That was never on the table for us. The sole concern was the citizens of Cedar Creek. Now, I will acknowledge that at the last meeting, or 2 meetings ago, there was a statement made by one of our task force members that indicated that he stepped off of the task force due to the gag order. Again, I've indicated there was no gag order. And it wasn't until that meeting that I was even aware that he had stepped off or removed himself from the task force. At every meeting, I would say, well, where's so-and-so? And the response would be, oh, somebody on the task force got an email and he's out of town for work. Or he had to go address whatever the issue was. I will acknowledge I didn't know he had stepped off. That was new information to me. But again, there was no gag order. Couple of things that were brought up during the public comment. I'm going to let Captain Brown deal with the decibels. with regard to, oh, and Lorraine actually touched on this, with regard to your question about the animals and the birds, first of all, we didn't change that section. That's what was in there from 30 years ago. But one of the things I've heard through the community is a concern about the height of the, why am I drawing?
Backstop.
Thank you. I say, why am I trying to blank on the name of this thing? On the backstop. We, as a task force, pretty much deferred to Trustee Foster with that issue. The backstop in and of itself is a sound barrier. That's how it falls under the gambit of a noise ordinance. The height of the backstop, that was given to us through Ms. Foster. As I'm sure all of you know, she's been in the gun business and has expertise in target shooting and things like that. So that was some information that she provided to us, and we felt it was important to have included because part of the charge at the very beginning of the ordinance is that this is for the health and safety and welfare of the community. And the noise is part of the safety and the welfare of the community. So that was one of my concerns. Another concern that was brought up that I wanted to make sure that I responded to is somebody talked about if your neighbor is shooting, why don't you just go over with your friend or a family member and talk to that neighbor? That I truly believe is the first step. I truly believe that's the first step. But if the situation doesn't get rectified to the point that both neighbors are okay and happy with the outcome, sometimes, unfortunately, making a phone call to the police is your only recourse. Now, there is a penalty section within the ordinance, and I'm going to defer again to Captain Brown to address that. But please understand that penalty section has loosened up the penalties. They are less severe, less dramatic than what's in the existing ordinance. So the last thing I want to reference is this. Through this whole task force process, what I have discovered is that there are a number of residents in Cedar Creek that didn't know that the noise ordinance existed. That's not the task force fault that you didn't know. But what happened is there became an issue. There became a complaint, which is how these things happen. There was a complaint made to the township, and the township then has to respond. So I'm gonna go back to the animals and the chickens. If you never complain about your neighbor's chickens carrying on at 5 o'clock in the morning, then it doesn't matter that we didn't change that section of the ordinance. They're not gonna complain, you're not gonna complain, life goes on. It's only when there's a complaint that there's a reaction. So if you can cut off a complaint by going and talking to your neighbor about whatever the issue is, whether it's chickens, or it's guns, or it's the fact that they're out revving up their engine, or whatever it is, that's obviously the first step, is be a good neighbor and try to handle it yourselves. But if it becomes an issue and it can't be addressed, then there is in fact the ultimate recourse of calling in for assistance from law enforcement. And then there are in fact penalties outlined in the ordinance to protect everybody involved. So I'm going to just double check my notes and make sure that I covered all the things I wanted to make sure that I addressed, but I think that I have. I apologize. There is one last thing to point out to you, and that is, as you go through the proposed changes, and you can see which items we did in fact recommend changes on, I will tell you that out of all of those changes, we voted as a task force on every single one of them. And I can think of 2 votes where we had 1 opposing vote, 1 no vote, out of all of them. So this entire task force that sat here and met and reviewed, we were all in agreement. If there was a complaint about what the proposed language was, or a complaint about a suggestion of how to modify it, how to make it less restrictive. We all had the opportunity to discuss it, and there was only 2 votes that I can recall where one particular individual voted no. So everything else was unanimous. From all of our different backgrounds, from all of our different experiences, all of our different professional lives, we all agreed, including your residents of Cedar Creek. We ultimately voted to send this proposed amendment, this proposed changes to the ordinance, to the board. It is the board's ultimate decision whether they're going to accept our recommendations, they're going to reject our recommendations, or they're going to modify those recommendations. But the ordinance is on the books, and if they reject our recommendations and say, we're done with it, just throw the whole thing in the garbage, it was a waste of everybody's time, you still have an ordinance. You still have rules that are in place. This is meant to make your life easier.
Thank you, Jennifer. Captain Brown.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Captain Brown. I'm a 30-year law enforcement veteran. I've been at the Sheriff's Department for the last 25 plus years. When I was asked to sit on this task force, I did not have to. I was asked if I was willing to. And I said, absolutely, I was, and I would be willing to help out the residents of this township, just like I have been for 25 plus years helping out the residents of this county. So to me, it was an honor to be on here and serve you. And as Ms. Barnes says, we worked really hard at getting this right. I think that's probably why we didn't have a lot of objections, because that was all discussed as we're trying to build out the right language and make sure we're interpreting it the right way and those types of things. I think that's why we had a lot of yes votes on most everything. So far, what's been talked about, pretty much, I was just checking stuff off because I made notes as you guys were asking questions, and so pretty much everything was covered. The decibel issue, it was, the current ordinance says 85 decibels. It was raised to 88, and we did that to be consistent with other laws. A decibel reading, generally speaking, from an enforcement aspect, we would have to have a certified decibel meter. We don't even have one, to be honest with you. We'd have to get one. Now, they're that expensive, so we could. It's not, but we haven't in the 25 years I've been here. The comment about shooting 4 and 5 hours at a time, the new proposal does not deal with that. Time is not the issue. The current ordinance says that it is they have a firearms section under the current ordinance, and it just says that if the noise bothers you, you're guilty, right? Well, this one doesn't say that. It's, again, meant to be less restrictive. My understanding about how this whole issue came to be had to do with guns, people shooting guns, and maybe not being very, very good as neighbors and being very respectful. But when we looked at the entire ordinance, it ended up really, I don't think this ordinance is going to really help that much. I think it still comes down to being neighborly. The chickens issue, I love that one because it's a good example. The very first thing we changed under current ordinance, it defines what the purpose is. It's one sentence. Okay. The first thing we changed was what the purpose was, and it's about promoting the health and safety and welfare of the people of Cedar Creek Township. So it's making basically the mission of this ordinance is that. It also establishes what standard is going to be used to judge a violation. Okay, so currently, if you violate one of these enumerated items, right, like the chickens, right, it just says you're guilty, period. If an officer writes a ticket and your chickens were bothering somebody, you would be in violation of the ordinance, and it would be a misdemeanor, right? Well, this one also has it enumerated because we didn't change that section at all. So that's still in there. And it could still be cited, but there's a reasonable person standard. That's legal terminology to explain that a magistrate is going to hear this. And he's going to say, would a person reasonable firmity feel that this was bothersome noise. If the judge says no, well, then it's not a violation. Under the current ordinance, as it's written, it would just be, did the chicken bother somebody? And that's the end of it. Okay. So this again gives more leniency to the people of the township. Okay. Because it isn't just up to the deputy. And I think it was asked during one of the people that came in about, well, what if this deputy has a chip on his shoulder? He doesn't like me, or whatever, what have you. He still can't get past the magistrate. The judge, the magistrate, is still going to say, it doesn't matter if he had a chip on his shoulder. Would a reasonable person, because we wrote that right in this tells him what standard he has to use to judge this. It takes common sense. Okay. So I thought the chicken's chirping was a good one. And I mentioned that the firearms was already part of this ordinance, and that somebody had mentioned, well, I don't understand why the 8-foot barrier was in there. Well, they already had a section on discharge of firearms and stuff, so it made sense to put it there as well. So, I hope I've answered everything that everybody's commented on. Like I said, it was an honor for me to serve this community, and I try to do a good job. And I'm not a gun guy, but I'm a Second Amendment guy. So I'm not in favor of having a bunch of guns around a house, but if you want to have a basement arsenal, I'm all for you. Okay, I believe in it. I believe it makes our country safe. So I'm trying to make this better for you guys. I hope I did a good job for you. The other part of the penalty section, this current ordinance is everything's a misdemeanor. Okay? The proposal is everything is a civil infraction except if you disobey the lawful command of a police officer and continue to violate the ordinance. That would still be a misdemeanor, but everything else is a civil infraction. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain Brown. Thank you from members of the task force. Okay, members of the board, do you have any questions for the members of the task force?
You want me to go first? And I don't know who wants to address this, if you would. Clarification from me. O and P, I see them as sections O and P. I see them as being linked, and I'm on the, I don't know if I'm on the right copy. Are you guys on the red and black one? Okay. 318 and 319, how's that? Okay. I'm trying to find a balance between the 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. or sunset, whichever's earlier. Okay, because that time changes so significantly up here. I mean, sometimes when I get off work, it's 4 p.m. and it's dark, and sometimes it's 10 p.m. and it's still light, it seems like. So, you know, that's a big window when somebody's getting off work and wants to go home and drop a couple holes in a piece of paper, you know, at 8 o'clock at night. The way this was written, that can't happen in the middle of the summer. So, I'm not sure, and I'm just trying to, like I said, I'm a shooting guy. I don't do as much as I want, but I do appreciate it. But I also appreciate that my neighbors shoot. So I know they're not going to complain about me, and I can't complain about them if I want to have my freedom to shoot. But it's that window between 7 p.m. and sunset. In my eyes, if that word, whichever is later, would make sense to me, but earlier makes me balk. How's that? Summertime, dark later, kids aren't necessarily going to school, you know, people tend to be out more. They're not bunkering down in their homes for a 5 o'clock dinner. I'm just trying to balance those. So I'm asking the task force. Thank you guys.
I'll be willing to answer.
Please.
the earlier, the time ends up being an issue. Everybody talked about time a lot on the task force, from the time the church was singing in the morning to whatever. So time ended up being a lot of conversation. So the earlier was to make sure that people aren't shooting after dark, target practicing after dark in the wintertime, because it's going to be 7 p.m. It's going to be dark in the dead of winter.
it's dark at night.
Right. So we're trying to address that issue, and so if it gets dark at 5 o'clock, because that's sunset, all right, well then that's earlier, right? So that's where the earlier came in. Now, the time of 7 p.m. was something that everybody discussed, and that's the time that we came up with to try to be fair to everybody's thoughts on it. If the
Well,
board,
can I ask a continue? I'm sorry, but I'm not gonna go to you, because this is my time, okay? You will have a chance later. My thing is, and I'm sure you talked about this, I was just kind of looking for your logic and your reasoning. Why aren't we linking it to the DNR's hunting, dusk to dawn kind of thing, and all that? And I know that the DNR is mentioned here, that's all cool, but I mean specifically when you go to shooting, was it impossible to link the shooting to that already established posted times even? Because most guys that shoot know the hunting regs. It'll tell you exactly what minute you can stop hunting, and you know that link is what I'm asking about.
the dawn to dusk thing was discussed, but the task force was trying to make it so that the people could shoot, and that the people that didn't want to hear it and wanted to have dinner at a decent hour or something at night could also be satisfied. So it really was just a trying to balance between those that want to shoot right up until the end of the night, and those that want to be able to have a little peace and quiet in the evening. So it was just trying to put something together that was gonna appease both. Not gonna necessarily make either one of them happy, but we're trying to hit a middle ground.
So my questions aren't strange to you. These are things you've probably talked about.
Yes.
And weighed them through. Okay. Because as the public reads through this, and just to get where my head is so everybody knows, you can yell till 11, but you can't shoot a gun after 7 or whatever. You can play music till 9 loud, but we also have to balance this whole decibel thing too, I think. So there's a lot to process here and to try to mesh in my eyes. It's an unenviable position you guys were in. Don't get me wrong. I've sat in on some of those meetings. I honestly, I'm trying to keep my personal agenda out of it, but at the same time, I like to shoot. But you know, I'm kind of torn on this one. So I'll be honest with you. The other thing is I don't shoot 20, 30 round clips at a time or whatever, which was a complaint of some people. So, you know, it always goes back to the responsibility of the neighbors and all that. If there's no complaint, there's no foul. So we were talking earlier, we had an open session, and we talked about the party. One of the best ways to keep the noise complaint away from your party is invite your neighbors, if they're available to be invited. Thank you, Lori, fair enough. So, you know, I think there's a lot written here and a lot of effort went into it, and I thank you all, but that is my big.
I want to point one thing out. If you look at the 7 p.m. time, and then you look at 316 pile driver hammers, etc., it's also 7 p.m.
Yeah.
So we were trying to stay consistent with like sounds.
Okay.
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 So it made sense.
All right. And for the people that are in this room, I don't know if you're aware of this. I did want to address the dB thing. Good solid conversation is 50 dB. Yelling is 60. And 88 is a jackhammer operator standing on top of a jackhammer. That's how loud 88 dB is. And 50 dB or 60 dB is 10 times louder than 50 dB. It's not just 10 dB more, it's 10 times louder. So 70 is 10 times louder than 60, 80 is 10 times louder than, you get the idea. We recently spoke to some commercial guys who had a blower out here, a blower, and they took a picture of the dB sticker on their blower, commercial leaf blower. At the blower, it was listed at 77 dB. And if you've ever stood near one of those, they are loud. So there's other things to take into consideration. Distance, vegetation. There's a lot that can come into play here. So I've taken this very seriously, my part of this, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to judge on it yet, but I've been doing a lot of research, and I do appreciate all the groundwork that's been laid out in front of me, and my peers we've talked about this. We're working through it. I don't know. I'm glad for your comments, by the way. I do appreciate every single one. But I think if you need to also make sure you give us a chance to evaluate the recommendation before you go too crazy. But thank you all for your comments.
Madam Chair, you mentioned
yield.
something early on when I served on the task force, and it was something that I think in your law practice that your job is not to make everybody, and could you elaborate on that, because it really is what this is about.
My comment to you was that when you go to court, nobody ever wins and nobody ever loses. You end up somewhere in the middle. So whether it's a court hearing or it's a mediation on a case, which is oftentimes court ordered and required, a good result on a case is if neither side is happy.
That's it.
Totally.
And I think
Sorry.
that speaks to what we're trying to do here. I mean, it's impossible to make everybody happy on this. It's impossible. And that was the task of sitting on this noise ordinance. We're not going to it's impossible to make everybody happy. And when Captain Brown is talking about, those people who like to target practice, and Heather and I were sitting, she's torn, literally torn. She's figuring out, how am I gonna go home? And when her husband he likes to target practice. Ron likes to target practice. So Ron and I have been married long enough. He can yell at me all he wants.
Well, we'll get through this, I'm sure. Bob, anything?
I do on the task force. If this passes, it'll be the first ordinance that didn't have 100% participation from the residents. Because this is a recommendation from outside, with outside people. But I'm saying that this township has always had the planning commission, task force. They never had task force till now that I know of. In the last 30 years, I know they haven't. Now, if we have the next task force, I hope we learn from it. I think these guys did an excellent job, but give our people a chance and look for qualified folks right in our own backyard, because I think that carries more weight, because I think a lot of this that we're getting all this attention is because we are getting people on these boards that don't live in the township, and they're making recommendations. The board makes the decision. I understand all that, but that's kind of where I am on it. And I don't agree with some of the stuff, and we talked about it earlier, and just being honest.
And that's
You have that right.
needed.
What? Why are y'all looking at me?
Did you have a comment?
You had stuff.
We did talk about some things in our open session at 5. There were the portion, the areas where 3.11, is that I don't know what version they have, but
The red and black book.
so, the construction or repairing of buildings, we talked about how the erection, excavation, demolition, alteration, or repairing of any building other than between the hours of 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. on weekdays, except in case of urgent necessity, in the interest of public safety, and then only upon permission having been first obtained from the township supervisor, clerk, or treasurer. If there is an emergency, please don't. I don't want someone to wait and try to contact one of us and say, hey, my roof blew off, I need to fix it, is that all right? So I think that, and we talked about that, and we all agreed that, yeah, that's ridiculous, that needs to be, needs to be changed. And we reworded it.
If I may,
Mhm.
we actually went through this and we've actually eliminated, in our eyes, some sections we didn't think were needed in this township. The recommendations were fine, but just so y'all know, this is not, as the product you see is not on our table anymore, I don't think. I think we've got at least a modified version, if you would.
Right.
Mhm.
So, and it's almost impossible to share all that with you, but just so you understand that we took their recommendation and now we're going piece at a time in trying to get through our common sense check. But we've been fortunate to have a little bit of a question and answer to clarify some of our questions before we just eliminate stuff. But so I apologize for interrupting. I just want to make a general statement. So.
No, and I don't know if you want me to read what we changed about that.
Yeah, you took,
what-
yeah,
what we-
if you would.
So, we reworded it just a little bit, am I being?
Loud.
Little louder.
Alright, so we reworded section I, construction or repairing of buildings, to read, the erection, excavation, demolition, alteration, or repairing of any building other than between the hours of 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. on weekdays, except in case of urgent necessity or in the interest of public safety. And then, period, sorry. And we took out that section about permission having to be obtained from the township supervisor, clerk, or treasurer. And Lorraine made a good point that because this is construction, the township, we should ask people to notify the township. There's a good chance that the building inspector is going to need to go out and make sure that everything is safe. So we added, notification of these actions should be made to the township within 24 hours. And no, we are not here 7 days a week, but they can call and leave a message on the machine. Monday morning, we'll get that message to Jeff and he can go and take a look.
So
So that was,
we're taking out.
yes, we also decided to remove section C, loudspeakers, amplifiers for advertising. This was another one where specific permission needed to be granted by the township supervisor, clerk, and treasurer. We didn't think that permission needed to be given, and after talking to Lorraine, she said she doesn't think that entire section even needs to be in there. We have never had any mechanical loudspeakers, sound amplifiers, or these types of devices in the township. Not in my lifetime anyway. So we didn't think that was a necessary section, so we thought that should be removed. We also had some questions for Captain Brown about the times. Chuck talked about the times for the shooting. I was wondering about the time for the radios, phonographs, etc., my thought was if someone is going to hold a wedding reception or something like that, 9 p.m. seems a little early.
It's on 3.3.
So we were thinking like 2 or 3.
Well, Chuck made the point that they could yell until 11, but they have to turn their music off at 9. So we were thinking in a situation like that where there's some type of an event, that 9 may be too early.
And I'm not disagreeing,
Okay.
that it's too early. My response to you would be, we try to use consistent timeframes, and there's always the request of just talking to your neighbors, making sure they're not gonna be upset
Absolutely.
if you're having, an
Right.
activity. And then, I don't know what other steps you can take. I think you need to get a special land use permit for that particular activity, just to make sure that there's no problems. But there were other ways to address a specific individual single occurrence event such as what you're discussing.
Okay.
But again, it was just, we tried to be consistent in the timeframes, but not be ridiculous at the same time. Because we had some lengthy discussions. There was a discussion about having instead of doing a 7 a.m. start in the morning for whatever the item was, there was a request by one of the task force members to make it noon. And so we went back and forth, and we, in the first proposal that we submitted, we had actually agreed on 8 o'clock because the noon was voted down. Then there was a discussion about 11 a.m., that was voted down. So we compromised and went with 8, and then as we worked through this the second time around, we all agreed to move it back to 7 a.m. But it is an example, unfortunately, of somebody having a personal agenda on whatever that topic was. But we finally got to what we thought was the right result of moving it back to the 7 a.m. But again, I'm not gonna disagree that the yelling till 11 and you can't do whatever after 9 p.m. I get it. And that might have just been an oversight on our part that we missed that particular time frame, even though we tried very hard to make sure we didn't.
Thank you.
And Lorraine and I did talk about a special land use permit this afternoon, which may well be the appropriate method to address. We've had several occasions where people have come in and they've talked to us about, we're going to have a special event. We don't have a vehicle to address that. And so it's time we do.
But we're not talking about graduation parties
No,
or something
we're
like that.
not talking about that.
We're not,
No.
we're using common sense.
So, but Lorraine and I have talked on several occasions that it's time we do have something on our books that does specifically address this type of event. And we don't have anything.
I was caught up with metrics on some of this stuff, and that's my background was metrics. But then it was brought up to be the reasonable person, which Captain Brown and Ms. Barnes have explained to me over and over. I like to think I'm a reasonable person, but some people probably don't think I'm a reasonable person all the time. But but in front of a magistrate where you get that, hopefully that clearer vision and a view, and hopefully it never gets there, but that's the metric. And I had a hard time wrapping myself around that because we're all so different. And I come from a way different background than a lot of other people, to be honest with you. And I appreciate everybody else's diversity as well. But it's still challenging to try to absorb all this, and I know you guys have been absorbing it for a long, long time. So
I want to address one final point, and then I think we're going to ask for a vote here. But somebody brought up from the community about mowing your lawn. This does not address mowing your lawn. It addresses commercial lawn mowing. And so that means if you hired a commercial company to bring in those great big lawn mowers, and you brought them into a residential area, you know, at 7 in the morning or 6 in the morning. That's the kind of equipment they're talking about here. So, mow your lawn to your heart's content. Nobody, the lawn mowing police aren't gonna come and
That's under
after you.
3.12. If you look at this, 3.12, residential operations.
So,
What that's
I
under.
just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that said, are there any more questions from members of the board?
I'm just, what we have, the changes that we have made, are we comfortable with those, or do we feel that there are any that we need to talk about some more, or think about some more? I think thank you to the task force, I think they did a wonderful job, and I just wanna make sure
If we're comfortable
On
with
the same
these, are we prepared to go forward with a vote on this ordinance? This proposed ordinance?
It has to be entered with a motion, I believe.
I'm just asking if we're comfortable to make a motion for this.
a motion to discuss
Us,
or a
motion to, all right, I'm going to make a motion that we vote on this now, with the proposed changes that the board has made.
So that'd be a motion to adopt.
To adopt?
The amendment
Okay, thank you, Ross. Thank you for keeping me straight. I'd like to make a motion to adopt this with the changes that the board has made.
Should we go over our changes and make sure that we all understand what those changes are?
Okay, do you wanna read it?
Sorry, I'm not trying to.
No, I'm
drag
fine with it,
everything out.
I'm fine with that. If you wanna read, we have, there are no changes on page 1. Is that correct?
Correct.
Page 2, we deleted item C. Is that the first one?
Well, how does everyone feel about B?
Oh, B, what did we do in there?
That we talked about, that is the radios, phonographs, etc., between 9 PM and 7 AM.
My only thing is I still feel it's inconsistent with D,
Mhm.
the 9 and the 11. And I don't know if the answer is 10 for both of them, or
Right.
9 for both of them, or 11 for both of them, I don't know, but I just feel because one is about music playing on the radio, and the other one allows singing. And I almost wanna say I'd rather listen to the radio sometimes than somebody singing. That's on video too, so, hey, that's my hesitation with that,
I agree.
so. My other part of it is how loud must they be singing to be bothering somebody that's living in Cedar Creek Township? I guess it's possible. Especially around the lake. That's
Yeah,
right. You
there
gotta
are
consider
areas
those
where
you
there are-
can't get 50 feet from a property line. I concede to that.
What do you think, Bob?
What, 11?
B, oh, 11 o'clock?
Yeah. That's where I'd be on it.
What do you think?
Well, there's nothing in here that oh. Cause that one does, yeah.
I just worry about the mom that's trying to get her baby to bed and it's already past their 7 o'clock and it's past 9 and now we're going all the way to 11.
Well, and it also.
School night, but.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if it's do you say weeknights or weekends? Do you wanna have a different time, or is that too complicated? I know there are people who work weekends too, but.
Well, they also have people who do shift work.
so.
Yeah,
Captain Brown, and there was no issue, was there? It was with the, and like weekends, it was generally when we considered, initially, it was, I remember from when I first served, it was, we looked at daytime as being the standard rather than second shift. It was first shift workers. And did you look at weekends at all?
Which section are we talking about?
Right now, we're in section B.
Well, that's, they may not have that one. This is radios and phonographs and yelling and shouting.
3.3.
3.3 and 3.5.
Okay.
Do you remember as well? Ms. Barnes on this one?
I don't, my notes for all of the meetings are in my car, and I can get
Okay.
it if I need to. I recall that we on numerous occasions discussed, as Chuck just brought up, well, you've got a mom with young kids. We discussed, well, first shift workers are gonna be leaving their house at 6 o'clock or 6:30 in the morning. We talked about third shifters getting out of work at 7 a.m. and getting home, and so they're not gonna want somebody out mowing their yard at 9 o'clock in the morning because they wanna get home at 7:30 in the morning and go to sleep. We took all of that into consideration to the extent we could, but you can't legislate for each individual person without infringing on somebody else's rights. So we tried to do what was in the aggregate, what was in the best of the community as a whole, knowing that you're still gonna be impinging on somebody's ability to have some freedom or enjoyment during particular hours. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I don't know if we did it specifically on this section.
But did you look at weekend sort of entertainment as well as in this whole, like things that people might typically do on a weekend?
I don't think we discussed weekends so much as just hitting a normal time. In fact, if I remember this right, it's when I told a story about the neighbor I used to live next to that would have parties until 4 in the morning on a Wednesday. Now, I worked second shift. Didn't bother me, but all my neighbors work day shift. They're all working in the factory or they're working in the office, and those people have young kids. I didn't have young kids. It didn't bother me personally. What bothered me was that he was bothering my neighbors, and I knew it.
Okay.
And so we were trying to say, listen, can we get something that is going to help in that situation? And so we're just looking at how can we balance that out. Didn't really matter if the person has to work on a weekend or not. We didn't really consider a change in the hours to the weekend. And I think that discussion was more along the lines of, we don't want to put too many rules in here.
Okay.
We don't want to convolute things. We want to make it as clean as we can, and knowing that it's not going to be perfect.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yes, Lorraine?
I remember we talked about trying to be consistent, because that was a big complaint the first time around. So we were trying to be consistent. Things like singing in the streets, we looked at the type of noise we're talking about. If the times are different, it was because the type of noise. I remember talking about that specifically. Certain types of noise, like pile drivers or whatever you. Well, I guess that's why we decided to leave
Okay,
the singing and
okay,
whistling at 11. That's the way I remember it.
okay.
I'm just wondering if, in the construction and repair, we have weekdays. Would we maybe wanna say, for the radios, phonographs, we have a weekday time is 9 p.m. And on weekends, knowing that most people might wanna, that might be when they're gonna have some music going, and have the weekend at 11, weekdays at 9. I might get in trouble for this one too, because my husband works weekends, he goes to bed at 9. So, I'm trying to look at the other side, so.
There's always a flip side to
There
it.
is, yeah.
And there are individuals that work up at, home at Alcoa, and they work the weekends. It's
Right.
a weekend rotation, so they work Friday through Monday.
Absolutely.
So now you're basically,
We're being too prescriptive here.
yeah, so I agree with what Captain Brown said. We tried not to get into the minutia. We tried not to get into the nuts and the bolts of, okay, they can do this on this day, but not on that day. We didn't want to sit there and try to dictate everybody's lives. We tried to do something that was as generic and would affect the most people as we could in a positive manner, knowing that you're still gonna infringe on somebody somehow. And then coming full circle to say, get along with your neighbors and it won't be a violation, there won't be an issue.
Right, and I think if you're talking about the weekends, I think most neighbors are, their own standards are a little bit different. They are a little more understanding. We're not gonna get a call on this anyway, in most cases. So I think on the weekend, we had to take in the human component, that we are a little more understanding as people.
So, Captain Brown, this is, again, we literally had somebody talk about, what if your neighbor doesn't like this? And the angry neighbor, you've got a party. You literally have a party. And you've maybe even gone so far as to say, I'd like to have this party. And 4 out of my 5 neighbors said, fine. But you've got the one stick in the mud that said, no.
And this document says,
Yeah.
so.
Didn't we talk about having the board develop a process for that in order to avoid that exact thing?
Okay.
Yes, to have that where, and you might put in here, maybe one sentence to add something to the effect of, a special permit can be obtained at no cost from the township.
Okay.
Or you can apply for one, then you guys develop what that is.
So that would be a workaround for something like that, where you've got that one sticky wicket that won't allow you to just live that normal life.
Right. It could be a simple special event type of permit, which would be whether it's a wedding or whether you're having your once a year family gathering where you're gonna have everybody in from out of town, you're hiring a band. So maybe it's just a special event and it can be for whatever the township officials decide is
We need a pavilion.
a unique situation.
Okay, that helps.
I just wanted to comment and say, I hope that the audience understands, this is the struggle we went through as a task force. Every single meeting, we had these type of, well, what about, I know somebody, how do we affect this? There was always something. And so what we produced, and I understand and I appreciate the changes that you guys have already talked about. I think those are reasonable and appropriate. But I just want people to understand that we tried to cover all of this. And you get 50 people in a room or you have 5 people in a room, you continuously have new concerns that come up. And we couldn't think of every single one of them.
This is painful. Just sitting here right now, trying to do this is painful. It's I know that we're not making everybody happy. I just feel the angst that you had to go through, doing what you did. Heather, I don't envy you when you go home tonight. Ron's here listening to this, so he's already mad.
There is one clarification between those two sections. In the yelling and shouting, it does say on the public streets. So that's not on private property.
No. Right.
So they can yell down the public street at 11 p.m. versus on private property you have to turn it down at 9.
Well, it does say at any time or place.
Or thank you.
Or.
Thank you. Or. I know or.
Those little words.
I know
are
or.
important.
It's that or will get you every time.
Got me again.
I just think we're gonna run into a problem with that, with people on the weekends. As much as I like it quiet on the weekends, personally, I think that's gonna be tough.
But you heard what Captain Brown said,
I know.
and we'll go.
I know, but I also think people are gonna say, I don't wanna have to go to the township.
You only open 3
I
days
just
a
found out
week.
Thursday that my, family's coming in and we're gonna do this get together, and we wanna play music till 11,
It's
so.
a 90% rule.
Can they make a phone
Yeah.
call?
We're not
Who says
open
they have
on
to do it in
Thursdays
person?
and Fridays, that was my
Yep.
thing.
But they have my
Well,
phone number.
Everybody has your phone. Um,
Did you wanna continue?
I'm.
Are you stuck on that?
I feel stuck on it, but we can go back to it. So we took out section C, or section 3.4 in the red and black copy. We did not make any changes to D, E, F, G, H, or I. I did read the,
We did make
I
change.
meant to stop there, I'm sorry.
Can I just interject one thing? On section 3.4, we did talk about eliminating that whole thing.
Yeah.
The only reason we kept it was because of all the protests around the country where people were using loud horns right in somebody's face. And that was why we kept it.
Okay.
So, just for that reason, to be able to have some kind of tool to stop that, that's antagonistic, and we didn't think that the township would want that, so we left that in there for that
Okay.
reason.
Yeah, that is not what we were thinking of. We were thinking of, you know, the advertiser with the thing on the car that's driving around the streets. So that's a good point.
We are rural. Okay.
So we were at I.
I.
We did make some changes to I. Do you
Which
want
you
me to, I read that.
yeah.
Deleting the permission and making the notification.
Mhm.
Yep. We made no changes to J, no changes to K, no changes to L, no changes to M, no changes to N, and in O, we were talking about the times there with the 7 p.m. or sunset, whichever is earlier, and 9 a.m., and that was where we had questions. And I don't know if we are leaving that or if we want to change anything there.
I'm personally, I'm not okay with 7 p.m. However, I'm willing to be tolerant to others' needs. I don't know how to say it any better, and I've heard their answers, and their answers make sense to me, but I just don't like the idea of 7 p.m. when a guy gets off work after a long day at 6:30 and can't go shoot his pistol or his gun. I have a big problem with that. So, and I think, in deference to people that are hearing a lot more noises than I am, I understand that, and that's where I'm torn. The disrespectful neighbors versus the respectful neighbors. And it's obvious to me, or it's a concern of mine, maybe I should say, that we have both, and it's causing a problem. I think that was one of the things that generated this whole mess. So, I wish I could be as fluent as others, and speak with them as well, but I don't like the way that's worded out. It bothers me. I moved to the country and I bought acreage so I could do what I want to do, and I'm probably blessed that I have neighbors that also shoot. So, but then again, I can sit at my house and hear Hilton Park Road shooting when, you know, I'm at my house doing my thing. So, and some of you probably can as well. And that area is supposedly shut down. So, I honestly don't know if we have an answer for that. So,
Captain Brown, is there any wiggle room that you see in that time frame?
This time was selected because it was consistent with what was already in the ordinance for a time under that pile drivers. That's why that time was chosen.
Mhm.
If the board decides
It
8
was
PM,
also in line with DNR.
not for shooting though. So for me, I don't think, in fact, I remember saying it didn't matter to me, but we were doing it for consistency. I think there's also, I mean, this section also does not apply to any and all allowed hunting permitted by the state, DNR, or other state laws.
Well, that makes the coyote hunting and raccoon hunting and all that stuff totally legal.
Yeah.
I think even some dog training is allowed at certain times. I don't know all the particulars on those, but I know they exist. I don't know of many pile drivers going on at 10 p.m., but I understand what you mean about the same type of noise, that bam, 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 which is what some guns are doing. Okay, I don't know if I don't know if I have an answer. I don't.
I agree, I feel torn on this one. I feel for the people who wanna sit outside and enjoy the evening in their yard and have some,
Yep.
hear the birds sing and enjoy the quiet country noises.
Well,
But
it was quite frankly, in the complaints we received, it wasn't just the quiet. I'm going to, I hear both sides, but I'm going to speak up now for those people because I got the complaints. It wasn't just noise in this case. It was more than noise. It was also a safety factor because now that is addressed in a little bit in the next section. It's the safe discharge of firearms, which I'm glad that you included that next section because that required the permission of those neighbors because I literally did receive those calls and people had shell casings in their yards and were, I'm not sure if that's what you call them, but were literally afraid to sit in their yards because of the sound feeling so close. So that was a consideration. And whether or not any of you in the audience who are feeling that it's, or some of you are in the audience who may disagree with this, those on the other side did have fear. And so I have to speak too for those individuals that made those calls to me, which is what the part of the task force was assigned with addressing. And so it's not easy because some of those people are sitting in the audience tonight as well.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Not
It's not at this particular juncture, I'm sorry, Cindy.
With regards to what you just said.
I haven't been able to let anybody else speak, so.
The safety aspect definitely has to come into play, but the general consensus is if you're shooting after dark, that's not safe. I don't, no matter where you were brought up, whatever you did, shooting after dark is typically not foreseen as safe, okay? So headlights in and of themselves on a car do not render a range safe, okay? Because headlights have a way shorter throw of light than a round could travel. So I don't think that that's a thing, okay? But safety has to be important to it. I mean, it's got to be a big thing for us. The noise, you're right, is secondary at that point. But unfortunately, I would love to make this work to where we could make people safe and not infringe upon the rights of the other 99.8% of the township. And that's my thing. And I know some of you would love to see a vote by the people. I know what you're saying, but that's not the way the law works. And I would love to provide an answer for you that's gonna work for everybody, and that's not gonna happen. But personally, I would like to sit on this for at least a little bit. Not extended, I just wanna have time to process what our task force has said, what the people in front of me have said to me, and I feel that's important, and maybe do a chicken test, just reach out. But you know, I mean, I wanna process this, but I don't want it to be a long time. I think this has been, if this is for safety, it's been in the process a long time. If safety was that important, and I think it's taken too long, is my point. Not that it's not for safety. I think we should be moving on this as soon as possible. But if you want to take a vote, I'll vote. If you want to table it for 3 days or 2 days, we'll table it for a couple days. Whatever you guys feel, I can go either way.
Well, it appears pretty clear to me we don't have the votes to move forward with it at this juncture. So, then I would call for a motion to table this at this point. Given that we do not have from what I hear, that we do not have the votes at this point, until we take this under further consideration. I would call for a motion to table this at this point.
I would second that. Or if you're making the motion,
I'm calling for a motion.
I make that motion.
I'll support it.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Bob,
No,
not table it?
I wanna get rid of it.
We're not gonna get rid of it.
It's not, but that's.
I know.
Okay. You wanna table it or vote?
Yes, the table.
All right. Heather?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Chuck, yes. I'll do it in my comments. Don't leave anybody, please.
All
Again,
right,
thank you
Ross,
all.
thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank you for
thank you.
sticking with us through this.
I'm actually gonna send you some email with just comments based on what happened tonight too.
Okay.
So that might be helpful for,
Please.
while you table, some things to think about.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, thanks.
Thank you for sticking with us through this.
So.
Members of the task force, my mouth is really dry right now. May the force be with you.
Thank you all.
All right, with that said, Chuck, if you would please give us an update on the
Watershed.
Muskegon River Watershed Assembly.
I would love to. The Muskegon River Watershed Assembly met here Friday and gave us a great presentation of what their process is and what they hope to achieve and all that. The biggest thing to know is that they're still looking for funding. They have not put in any permits, applied for any permits. They have asked the Army Corps of Engineers to begin their hydrological study and all the geology and all that stuff that goes with possibly opening up the Maple River again. But right now they're definitely in data collection. They've sent out an economic survey and they got most of that back. They've gone door to door with a lot of the residents on the Maple River. I know Scott and even came to my house and talked to my wife, so that was kinda cool. They are extremely interested in the potential, economic, environmental, issues, etc. They have the Little River Band of Indians, involved in this, because of the wild rice, the northern and southern wild rice. They're starting to get more exposure in the newspapers on this, project. It'll be years before it happens, if it happens, but one thing he is doing is reaching out to the public. He wants to know what you want to happen, what your thoughts are. And I can't begin to tell you how professional these guys are in their presentations, the way they talk to people, the way they answer questions. Their whole approach is scientific, it's economic. And the one other big thing they wanted to do was they want to ensure that it's sustainable. It's not a 5-year project, a 10-year project. They don't want people in 100 years asking, why did those idiots open up the river after we closed it 100 years before them? And literally, that's one of the comments he made. So it's moving forward, and he will keep us updated, and he has promised to update us monthly on all the different project steps that they're hoping to get going. So that's what they did. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and I'll give you everything I got.
Thank you. You'll note on the agenda that that we were going to address the budget. That again will be tomorrow evening here at 6. The next item on the agenda is the calendar. So if you buried. So if you had a chance to look at that, I need a motion to accept the dates on the calendar.
Can we change November 15th? No, I'm taking that day off, that's right. I'll make that motion.
All right.
Now support.
All right. Any discussion or issues with that? Mine got buried someplace, but I know mine's okay.
Yeah.
Roll call check, please.
Ready?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Chuck? Yes.
All right, motion carries. The calendar, the 2022 calendar is all set to go.
And that will be published post-haste.
Yep. Okay, board comments. Bob?
I have none. It's a long meeting. I think everybody's ready to go home.
I did have, Heather, do you have anything that you
I do, yeah. I normally do read the budget amendments, and I apologize that I didn't do that, so I will read those now. There were 3 budget amendments. 2 of them were to reflect an increase in revenue. When we budgeted at the beginning of the fiscal year, we estimated our tax revenue to be lower than what we're actually going to bring in. So I was asking for 2 budget amendments. One is to reflect our current property tax operating. We had budgeted $65,000. We are projected to bring in $75,000 for Cedar Creek operating. And for the fire operations, we had budgeted $100,000. We have projected to bring in $123,000 in our fire operating millage. So that was just to reflect that, so it is more in line with what we budgeted. We're not required to amend revenues, but it is just it's the more responsible thing to do. So that was those. The third amendment was for an expenditure, and that was to move $2,000 from contingency to the deputy treasurer's salary. And that was because our deputy treasurer was needed more than we had anticipated when we budgeted at the beginning of the year. And quite a bit of that was due to the fact that we all got sick with COVID except for the deputy. So, and the zoning administrator. So they basically ran the township for us for about a month. So the more hours that was to move $2,000 from contingency to the deputy treasurer's salary. So
Heather, do you want to talk just a moment about the fire millage? Do you have?
Sure, if everybody wants to stay a little longer. So,
Just a second, just so they understand that.
Sure, and I do talk about it in the budget narrative. Our fire millage, currently, first of all, it's going to expire this year, in December, so we are going to be going to the voters for a renewal on the fire operating millage. And, a lot of people don't know that the revenue that we bring in from the operating millage, it does not cover the contracts that we pay to Holton, Dalton, and Muskegon Charter Townships. So, for example, this year, our revenue should be $123,000, as I said. The cost of our fire contracts was $142,298. So about $20,000 out of our general fund operating covers those fire millage contracts every year. Just FYI.
Thanks, Heather.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's it for me.
Yeah. And I just wanted people to know that I have not yet heard from Adam Bain. I sent in a little email or made a call, so I haven't heard an update on the school resource officer. So I don't know where we stand on that. I know that they have another meeting coming up. I believe it is on the 14th, and that is on the agenda. So that's all I know on what they're doing with that. So I'll keep you posted when I know more. Chuck?
Okay, if you have specific helpful thoughts that you can send to me, feel free to do that, okay? Pro or con on this noise ordinance, I would love to hear you. It's clerk@cedarcreektownship.org. Just send me an email. Don't get too fancy or too wordy, because I've got to read it all. But I would love to hear your thoughts, and I know there's a lot less people here now, but I know that there's both sides of the book here, and while I probably know most of what you're thinking, I'm not opposed to hearing from you. So please reach out. No vulgarity, please. I don't respond well to that, so just do your best and let me know what you're thinking, I guess is my point. I want this to be good for as many people as possible. How's that?
Thank you.
And I'm not gonna let this sit. We're gonna go, okay? If this is for safety, we need to move on it. So I just want another couple days to look at it, to process what I heard tonight from you and them as well, okay? Thank you.
Okay, public comment. Yes, sir.
All right, my name is Dirk Burkett. I live over in Ryerson. First, I'd like to say that I'm a retired military police officer. I spent a couple years in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was a former corrections officer. I'm also a licensed gun manufacturer and dealer. I've got a little bit of experience in this field. I did ask last year when we had the meeting at Holton, I said, I would like to be on your guys' task force, but I guess Arlen was instead. I'm also a diesel mechanic and a heavy equipment mechanic. To address something you said about lawnmowers, the same lawnmowers that they use for commercial are the same ones you can go and buy anywhere, and a lot of people do use the zero-turn mowers. So I just wanted to address that specifically. The berm, that in order to really do anything about noise, it would have to completely encircle the area you're in. So I just wanted to address that. Shell casing only goes a few feet from a firearm. If somebody's bullets are landing in somebody else's yard, then that is an issue. But that really isn't an issue with noise. That's just people being completely reckless and not adhering to our current laws. The other thing I wanted to say is that people keep talking about this is for safety. I thought this was a noise ordinance. If we have a safety issue, we should have a safety ordinance. What I got from the lawyer is It's not that you can't put this to a vote, it's that the township has the right not to put it to a vote, but they could if they wanted to. And then I do agree that shooting guns at night could be reckless. I do personally own night vision goggles and thermal vision and machine guns. The other issue I had with some of the things there, from what I get out of the ordinance, I could record myself shooting a machine gun and then play it after the hours that you guys can't shoot if I really wanted to be a jerk. So that just seems like kind of an issue, you know, like if you can't have the loud noises, then it should be more consistent for the time frame. And I believe that's all I got. I want to thank you guys for tabling this to take it under further consideration. We do appreciate that. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I do want to say one thing. The attorney did not say that it can go to the public.
She said the township has the right not to put it to a vote.
It was Lorraine.
Okay, I apologize if I mixed up what person said, but.
I'm not an attorney.
Lorraine did not say that. No.
The verbiage that she used, and like I said, I'm former law enforcement, implied that the township has the right not to take it to a vote, not that they were not allowed to take it to a vote from the people, the community.
I don't believe that's what she said.
I would like clarification, because I do believe that legally, if you wanted to take this to a vote, it's legal to do so. If you could, I appreciate it.
Okay, but thank you for your comment. Lynn?
I would like to comment, but I would like to comment not on camera, because the story I'm about to tell you is a very private family story that happened here in the township, and it has to do with firearms. And it predates when Chuck was the clerk. Stephanie was the clerk, and you know my story. And it's a heart-wrencher. And I choose not to tell it on camera.
It would need to be after this. We're not going, I mean, you're on camera right now, so.
I know I am, but I haven't told my story yet.
What are you asking me to do?
It will not have as much impact. I would like the room to hear it, and I'm very disappointed that Mr. Shane Brown's not still here, because I had interactions with him over, there was an occurrence at my house. I will tell, all right, so I'll tell the story.
No, I mean,
I don't,
if you'd like to wait until we're.
I'm telling you now, because it will not have the impact if I wait and don't have a room full of people and all that kind of stuff. So about 8, my grandson turns 9 this year. So 9 years ago, Labor Day weekend, after a canoeing trip, we get home and we're having dinner, blah, blah, blah. We hear a noise, not sure what it is. A week later, I'm outside and I see a hole. And I said to my husband, you need to come here, we've got a bee hole right here in the siding of the house. That was a bullet hole. It went through 2 of my deck chairs, through my house, hit the china cabinet, and I picked up that bullet off my dining room floor. My entire family was over. And I could have lost that grandson, who was a nursing child at the time, and my daughter, because they were out there on that deck that night. This is not a noise issue. But you don't want to know what I could not get? I called the sheriff. I said, I have a bullet here. It came from one of my neighbors. I can't help you. I got no help. You want to know why? I can't possibly figure out who was over there at that time to do whatever. I can't figure that out. That happened a week ago, so whether it was 10 minutes ago, an hour ago, a week ago, he couldn't help. So how can he or any of they enforce a noise ordinance when somebody's just pointing their finger? I had evidence in a baggie. I ended up taking it down to the sheriff's department to talk to him. I couldn't even so much as get a officer to my house. I ended up here at this office because I was one hell-bent grandma that was going to not let this drop. I ended up here talking to Stephanie, and thank God she knew that the DNR has much more authority and apparently wherewithal than the sheriff's department. And the next day I had a DNR officer at my house. that says, that's just cause, that's all I need to know, and went 2 doors over, 2. So that means the people that were willy-nilly with this firearm shot across another neighbor's property, hit my property, and was in my house. There was a shooting gallery hanging in their tree, solo cups and cans and all that kind of stuff. From the directionality, we could tell where they were versus the properties and stuff like that. The problem I have with the noise ordinance is you all think that there's teeth and that it's going to solve problems. It's not. It's not. I couldn't even get a sheriff to come out when I had a bullet in my hand that hit my house in this township. And that happened here. So, good intentions, probably. How is it that I had no resolution from the sheriff's department? I really got no resolution from the DNR, other than they followed it through. They made sure that they visited the home, which is like a cabin to some people that live over on the east side. So they were up vacationing, doing their recreation, having fun. They weren't being careful. That's not covered in the noise ordinance because they were within all the boundaries of the noise ordinance. I'm passionate about it because I could have lost family over this. I didn't, but your noise ordinance doesn't address any of that. And it wasn't a noise issue. It was a safety issue. And yeah, it really was. But at that point, how, after an event, again, like hours, minutes, whatever, if an officer when I lived in the city, I couldn't even get an officer to arrest a vagrant that was urinating in the street because he didn't personally see it. And if they don't personally see it, they can't act on it. Put that to the question of your task force. If they don't personally see it, how can they act on it? Okay, that's valid.
All right, thank you, Lynn. I appreciate your comment.
Thank you, Lynn.
Stephanie?
First thing I want to do is apologize to you. I shouldn't have stepped in the middle of your conversation, so I apologize. I just couldn't understand 85 to 88. So, to the people that think this should go to a vote, I understand your side, but let me tell you something. Right now, I'd like to put myself to a vote for everything happening in this country, but I elected the officials and I have to deal with what they're doing. These are elected officials. That's what you voted them in to do. They are not here to do what you want to do. You voted them to run this township, and that's what they do. Because I'm sorry, you can't call your senator and you can't call the president and you can't call all your elected officials to tell them you don't like what they're doing. I get there's disagreements. I don't agree with everything either. And I have to agree as far as the noise ordinance, because the reason I sympathized with her was because prior to that, I had somebody that was shooting from one end of my property and the other end of my property, poaching. And my husband walks with my daughter at that time. My husband had to drop to the ground. Had my daughter been on his shoulders, she would have been dead. This is my problem with this shooting, because 4 hours straight shooting, I can't go for a walk in my backyard, because when it's going on and I got 1,000 rounds being shot in an hour, I'm certainly not going to walk in my woods. So I'm sorry, but your noise ordinance doesn't address that. He can still shoot for 4 straight hours. That's a shooting range. That's not a residential, I'm target practicing. And Bob, I'm sorry, but nobody on this community, Mr. Burkett, because we just found that out, if I said that right, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
But we are dealing with legal matters. We are dealing with things that residents don't have the knowledge of. So to go outside, I commend this board to get people that have the knowledge of what we're working with. And I'm sorry, you had somebody that was completely against this that was on that board. Hasn't shown up for anything but one meeting. So how can you guys get your representation when the people we put on there to represent you don't show up?
Well, I'm just
So,
saying, we do
I have the floor, thank you.
professional people in our township.
And those professional people can come forward. It was very well advertised in May. I'm just saying, don't put down the people that are coming in here trying to help your community for free. He's a police officer. I understand what she's saying, but he's still a police officer. He knows the rules better than this member right here, she's not gonna be able to answer those questions. So I commend this board for getting people that know the right answers to be able to do this, because you are not gonna make everybody happy. Absolutely not.
Thank you, Stephanie. Lorraine?
Dirk, if you're interested, there's an application for boards and commissions. You need to fill one out. Anybody else who wants to be involved, because Bob, you're on the planning commission. There is never public at the planning commission meetings. The planning commission makes recommendations to the board to adopt and amend zoning ordinances all the time. You know that. We've made lots of changes. There's never one person here until they're upset about what we've already done. Where are you when the meetings are going on? So show up to other meetings, because there's more. I know you people don't like rules, but there's lots of ordinances. Get involved.
March 23rd, 6 o'clock. Or you can come tomorrow night, we're here at 6 o'clock.
Budget, yeah.
And then Thursday at 4.
Hearing.
So, I wish that Jennifer Barnes was still here. Some of my comments are related to what she said. I'm going to say them anyway because I think you need to know. A few times she's referred to us as an audience. I know that the MTA book says you should refer to us as an audience while you do your meeting. That's an attitude problem that we have, that we see with you all, because that's how you all have been trained for some time. We are not your audience. Our Constitution says the power is inherent in the people. We are the community. We are the bosses. We don't just make decisions when we elect you. We're asking you, as I did earlier today, and thank you for your input. You heard me, and I appreciate that. When you give us feedback from our questions, we appreciate that. When we have a two-way conversation, as you're asking for more feedback, we appreciate that. And I will thank you for it every time, if I can remember to. She also talked about, what she really was talking about was Arlen. Arlen was on the board, on the task force board. And he did not like, and I know there's a definition for gag order, he was asked to put his name on a document that was squelching his first article rights. He could say whatever he wants to say at any point in time and publish it however he wants to publish it. And the fact that he was forced to sign something that says he cannot do that, I have a problem with. And I have a little documentation to prove that. This is from a case called New York Times versus Sullivan. This is a Supreme Court case. I will quote, "For a representative democracy ceases to exist the moment that the public functionaries are by any means absolved from their responsibility to their constituents. And this happens whenever the constituent can be restrained in any manner from speaking, writing, or publishing his opinions upon any public measure or upon the conduct of those who may advise or execute it. An unconditional right to say what one pleases about public affairs is what I consider to be the minimum guarantee of the First Amendment." And further, the theory of our Constitution is that every citizen may speak his mind and every newspaper express his view on matters of public concern and may not be barred from speaking or publishing because those in control of government think that what is said or written is, as she said, unwise, unfair, false, or malicious. That flyer that he chose to share before that May meeting may have had mistakes. In your view, it does. In my view, it didn't. The chicken thing, we all know, it's still there. Oh, it was there before, and therefore it excuses it. Well, you crossed off a lot of other things that were there before. Cross it off if we don't like it. We've brought it up a few times. It doesn't matter. That flyer, as you said, was unfair, false, or malicious. That's okay. He can say that whatever he wants to. He can say anything that's public material on any public platform, and the fact that you all restricted him is a problem. You're lucky he didn't sue you, because he thought about it, and I know you all know that. Such criticism cannot, in my opinion, be muzzled or deterred, it says, in this Supreme Court ruling. Where public matters are involved, the doubts should be resolved in favor of freedom of expression rather than against it. I've probably gone over 2 minutes. If you challenged me on that, I would read you more of this. And you might want to review it. It's long, but it's got some good facts. I yield.
Thank you, Karen. Does anyone else have any comments? Yep.
One is on the sound ordinance. If you want to, just put it in there. Maybe you want to go to sunset on that deal instead of 7 p.m. because there are people that get out late. Just a thought, okay? Just for my 2 cents. The other one was on the sound ordinance for working on your home. I know that there are roofers that have to come in early sometimes to start roofing because of the heat. Just to keep it in mind that maybe they start like daybreak. It's not a consistent thing, but that's something that you may want to think about in the noise ordinance. The other one is a couple of questions. I know we're getting into the June thing with the gypsy moth, or which is now the whatever they call it now. Yeah, now they've changed it a little bit, so we're good. I know that you guys have allotted a certain amount of money for that, and I know you're not going to spray for that. Okay, I've already contacted Muskegon County. They said it's not their problem, it's your problem, and I got that whole thing. But what for you guys is it going to take for you to dish out some of that money to us? Because I don't know if you have driven around in the township at all and noticed what they've done in June. I mean, they've stripped trees. They've killed almost every pine tree on our land. And they were healthy pine trees. Understand that. When somebody says they only damage unhealthy, then that means I had every unhealthy tree that was a pine tree on my land. That's false. They ate oak leaves, maple, they ate everything. Okay, I've never seen it like this before, ever. The poop was so thick in our driveway. We went to Sam's Club one time and my car was shaking. I could not figure out what was wrong with it. It was caked on there that bad. So I don't know what system you guys have in place. I know it's you're gonna tell me it's a personal problem, I got that. But what is the money, when is the money gonna be dished out? What are the circumstances for that? And if you're not gonna do that, why collect the money for that? That's just my questions to you guys.
Thank you for your comments, but I am going to answer that one. We are not collecting money, and you talk like we're collecting money for that.
Well, you had said you set aside X amount of dollars every year for, which would be collecting. If you want to say set aside, you can say set aside, but you're collecting it for that specific reason, correct?
Every year, I believe when I first started, the amount was $300, and then the board decided it would be better to budget $500.
That's what I heard.
So as we plan our fiscal year and we look at how much money we can spend in each department, we plan, okay, if we need to spray for gypsy moths, there's $500. That doesn't mean next year there's 1,000 and then there's 1,500 and then it doesn't grow, it's not collected. It's just, if there's a need for it, this is how much we have allotted to spend on it. So it hasn't been specifically collected.
Allotted then? How's that?
Allotted, yeah. Yeah.
Budget.
And I believe that several years ago, before my time, when there was a gypsy moth problem, the county received a grant, and because of that grant, they were able to spray. And the township portion was either, I believe it was $300, $300 to $500, I'm not sure, and that was why that amount was always, okay, we should allot this amount. The county is not receiving grant money this year and they are not spraying, and according to the costs that we've received, it's just not something that the township can afford.
And I know you saw my post earlier today, so.
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't see my?
No,
Okay.
I didn't see that. I didn't see any posts, so I don't know.
Oh, okay.
The other thing is that then if that's the case, and I'm fine with that, it's gonna be a personal thing for me to get it sprayed or do whatever. Is someone from the township going to Muskegon County and saying, hey, look guys, in this township, this is the kind of problem, bring pictures, showing stripped down trees that are
We
just,
have worked, I'm just gonna interrupt you, because
Okay.
we have worked so closely with the county on this. They've come out here, they've looked at all they've looked at the trees in the county. They've looked at the egg masses in the county. And they really believe that because of the heavy rains in the fall, that the egg masses were killed or diminished by a virus. That's what they're hoping. So they believe that there will be fewer, really hoping that there will be fewer spongy moths this year. And remember, this is cyclical. Believing that this is either the second or third year. And yes, you are absolutely right. The pine trees were decimated. There's no denying that. This is a 3-year cycle.
we got one more year.
That's what I believe. Some people are saying this is the 3rd year.
Yep.
I think this is the 2nd year of it, but,
We've had, this will be the 3rd for us.
okay.
Third for me too.
First was not too
Okay.
bad. Last year was just
Okay.
terrible.
So-
You couldn't even go outside.
3
For a month,
years,
6 weeks.
3 years, your trees should be okay for 3 years. Now,
Pine
not the,
trees won't be.
not the pine trees.
Yeah.
It probably has killed your pine
It did.
trees. The other trees should be good. Now, I'm not a scientist,
I
so don't quote me.
I just wanted to hear that you guys are working with Muskegon County to let them know.
Absolutely.
This is specifically what is happening to the residents of this county, that it is.
Yes.
I mean, they charge taxes, I got the tax part. You're taxing me for land that is being devalued by this thing, because, not saying you raised our taxes this year, but is my land worth as much when all the trees are being killed? That's how I'm looking at this thing, because it is, and it's, I don't know if you've ever lived through it on your property, but when you have to go outside and smell this stuff, and it is, I mean,
We all have
I've
them.
never had this before, okay, this is the first time that we've ever had to sit inside for 6 weeks and say, all it is pooping on our trailers, our house, our cars, it's staining cement, it's doing everything.
We all are living through it too. Heather has a pool. They couldn't even go in their pool. And
I can imagine
yeah,
that one.
Yeah. So I want you to know, every one of us are sharing in the very same experience that you are. And almost the people in Clear Lake had it. They
That's
really.
where we live pretty close
Oh,
to it.
okay.
It did it.
It really hit Clear Lake
Yep.
harder than almost any place else in the township. So, believe me, I understand I mean, people were telling horror stories about putting covering their kids, when in kind of shrouds when they walked out of the house, because the kids were terrified, So, believe me, we understand what you're talking about.
And then one more comment. The task force that was for the sound ordinance, good for you guys, because it's gonna take a lot to get through that one. It really is. My heart goes with you, because you're not gonna keep everybody happy, got that part. But just make it, less laws are better. I know the reasonable part of people sometimes doesn't work very well. I would love to say I could walk over to my neighbor and say, hey, look, can you just knock it off? Not everybody's reasonable sometimes, and just try to keep it broad for people, because we do live rural. I like to go out and shoot just like anybody else does, and I'm retired, so I can do it in the daytime. I'm not going to do it at night, but there are some people that do come home. I'm pretty easy going with, I'm not shooting cans in a tree. I know what they can do. I know the damage it can do. So, that's a big part of it, is the reasonable side of things, I guess. I did not know that people were coming in from outside of here and shooting on the weekends. That's a whole different game, but sorry for that one.
Thank you for your comment. I
Welcome.
appreciate it.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
I thought it was, common sense, state law to have a backstop when you shoot. That's my common sense. I mean, that's normal shooting common sense. If you don't have it, you should be ticketed, done. The whole noise ordinance thing, I grew up in Ravenna, where we had, during the week, 9 o'clock, you're done. Friday, Saturday, you had a different curfew. You would be allowed to be louder until 11 o'clock. I hope you take that into consideration. Last year, I had a wedding. I went to each one of my neighbors. I said, hey, I have a wedding, reception going on. Do you mind? If you want, come on over, drink. I don't care. I'm gonna be loud. And they're all fine with it. I mean, if we have to get a pass, so then he ain't getting called out at 12 o'clock at night for making loud noises, then let's do it. Oh, yeah,
All right, thank you, I appreciate it. Cindy, did you have a comment?
The first thing I was gonna ask you earlier is, if someone calls you and says the bullets are landing on their property, that's not true.
Oh, well, I didn't know what the right terminology was, so that
Well, the
was-
shell casing's gonna be laying next to your foot, not on somebody's property.
Yeah.
The next thing, I have a lot of parties at my house, and a last minute, call up and say, hey, we're gonna get together. I'll be darned if I'm gonna have to call and get permission. Sorry, but
Okay.
I will not call up and say, I'm gonna have a party, because that party could last 2 hours, or that party could last till 11 o'clock at night. I do a lot of family reunions at my house, and I'm planning 2 of them right now. And then the next one is the time. I think it should go with the DNR times on shooting. Because if I get my book out and it says that I can shoot at 6:59, it shouldn't be 9 o'clock.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it, Cindy. How come you haven't
I forgot
invited
about
me to any of those parties?
I forgot about that one, that's what I wanted to say too.
She can cook too.
She can cook, look at that.
All right, does anyone else have any
I forgot about that
questions?
one. Just say cook.
Okay,
I believe
no further questions? All right, then, may I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Sport.
All right, meeting is adjourned at, ooh, this is a long one, 8:30.